She called me useless and handed me divorce papers the same week I lost my job. That was the moment everything shifted, not just between us, but inside me. I still remember the echo of her words in that tiny apartment kitchen. The way she didn't even blink when she said it. She didn't cry, didn't hesitate, just slid the envelope across the table like it was a late bill. And I, like a fool, thought we were just having a rough patch. My name is David Warren. I'm 38 years old. I used to be an advertising strategist, one of the best in my firm if the awards on my shelf meant anything. I built campaigns that made people feel something, but the one person I couldn't reach, apparently, was my wife. For 12 years, Madison and I shared a life. Not always perfect, not always smooth, but built from scratch. We met in college. She was a graphic design student. I was buried in marketing textbooks. What started as late-night coffees turned into plans for the future, a future I worked like hell to build. I didn't see it coming, the divorce, her detachment, the cruel timing. We had always joked that she was the more artistic one, and I was the boring suit with spreadsheets. I wore that like a badge of honor. Stability was my language of love. She knew that. And yet when the agency downsized and I was laid off after 14 years, she didn't just walk away. She kicked me while I was down. "I can't be married to someone with no drive," she said. "You're not the man I married." It wasn't rage I felt. It was silence. A vacuum. I couldn't even speak. For 2 weeks, I sat in that same kitchen chair after she moved out. I couldn't eat. I couldn't even cry properly. Just played our old Spotify playlists on loop like some sad movie cliche. You spend your whole adult life trying to build something, only to realize it was always one-sided, that the loyalty you thought was shared was really just tolerated. And maybe the worst part? She didn't leave for someone else. She left for something else. Fame. She had started getting attention on Instagram. Her designs were being reposted, her face was showing up in sponsored makeup reels. She saw my layoff as dead weight, a sinking ship. And instead of helping me bail out water, she jumped onto the next yacht. But even in that moment, sitting there with the divorce papers, the unpaid rent, the rejection emails from new agencies, I didn't get angry. I got quiet. I started listening, watching. And that's where the real story begins. Before everything fell apart, I thought I had it all figured out. My 20s were a blur of ambition. Late nights at the office, ramen dinners, pitch meetings that ran until sunrise. I wasn't born into money and I didn't graduate with fancy connections. Everything I had, I earned. Slowly, painfully. I started at the very bottom. My first job in advertising was answering phones and picking up coffee for people who didn't remember my name. But I stayed late, studied trends, watched how the best minds in the room pitched emotion, not just products. Within 5 years, I wasn't just part of the team. I was leading it. When Madison and I got married, we were still broke. She was freelancing, barely making rent from art commissions and print sales. But we made it work. I cooked dinners when she was buried in client work. She listened to my pitch decks when I was preparing for big meetings. We weren't rich, but we were aligned. Or so I thought. I built us a home, emotionally first, then financially. I was never flashy. I drove a used sedan long after I could afford better. I invested in her dreams, helped fund her first design, studio setup, paid for her online certifications, even covered our bills during the dry months. Not once did I throw it in her face. My promotion to creative director was the peak. I was managing national campaigns, traveling to conferences, mentoring new talent. That's when the money really started to flow in. But with it came distance. Not just between me and Madison, but between her and the version of me she used to know. I noticed it in small ways. She started staying out later, talking more about her branding than about us. Influencer meetups, sponsored partnerships, makeup tutorials. I didn't mind her success. In fact, I celebrated it. I reposted her work, bought gear for her studio. But slowly, I became the background noise in her story. It wasn't one big betrayal. It was 1,000 quiet cuts. I remember coming home one night, exhausted from a brutal client pitch that had gone sideways. I found her filming a skincare ad in our bedroom, ring lights set up, music blaring. She didn't even look up. I said, "Hey, I just need 5 minutes to breathe." She said, "Then take it somewhere else. I'm working." That night I slept on the couch. Not because we fought, but because I didn't belong in the picture. She was trying to paint. There were more signs. She started introducing me as a consultant when we went out. Stopped wearing her ring. Rejected intimacy without explanation. And when I asked if something was wrong, she'd always say, "You're just imagining it, you're stressed." She made me feel like I was the problem, like my growing unease was just weakness. And maybe I believed her. I thought I could fix it if I just worked harder, that maybe I had become boring, predictable, that maybe my quiet strength was no longer enough. When I got laid off, I expected heartbreak. I expected tears. I expected her to say, "We'll get through this." But she didn't flinch. In fact, she looked relieved. Like she finally had an excuse to leave without guilt. Like my fall gave her the freedom to rise without shame. I didn't just lose my job or my wife. I lost the illusion that I had built something mutual. Turns out, I had been carrying both of us for years. And the moment I stumbled, she let go. After Madison left, things didn't get quiet. They got colder. And not just in the apartment, in every part of my life. People stopped calling. Friends became distant. Even the few colleagues I'd kept in touch with after the layoff started replying to texts with empty lines like, "Hope you're doing okay, man," and then nothing. I wasn't just alone. I was erased. I tried to bounce back, applied for jobs, reached out to recruiters. But the market was brutal, and apparently so was the word of mouth behind the scenes. Somewhere along the way, the narrative shifted. One recruiter finally leveled with me. "Honestly, David, there's a weird vibe around your exit. Some folks think maybe you burned out or got let go for underperformance." I blinked. That's not true. I was let go in a cost-cutting wave. Half my department was gone. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I believe you. But that's not what's floating around." I couldn't prove it, but I knew. I knew who was whispering poison into the industry. Grapevine. Madison still had ties to a few of my former clients. She'd been collaborating with some of them on influencer branding gigs. I saw her face pop up in a campaign that my team had pitched just months before I left. She was replacing me not as a wife, but as a professional presence. My work, my relationships, even my creative fingerprints, she was co-opting them, subtly, strategically. One night I got a notification on LinkedIn. Madison had launched a new brand consultancy, Warren Creative. My last name, my legacy. Her pitch? Blending strategy and soul for modern brands. That was my exact line from my last keynote talk, word for word. I stared at her logo, a soft pastel icon set against sleek typography. It was beautiful. I knew it was. She had talent. But it was built on bones I helped lay down. And now she was painting over the gravestone like nothing had happened. The worst part wasn't the theft, it was the silence. She never reached out, never said, "Hope you're okay," never acknowledged how tightly she was wrapping herself in everything I built. I started hearing from mutuals that she was thriving, that she was booked months out, that she was going on podcasts and talking about how she escaped a toxic dynamic with a man who couldn't handle her ambition. That was the moment something hardened in me. It wasn't anger, not the screaming kind. It was sharper, still, cold like glass. I knew how the industry worked. I knew how brands selected talent. I knew what real strategy looked like and what was just curated fluff on a Canva deck. She might have stolen the spotlight, but she didn't know how to keep it lit. So I did what I do best. I studied. I watched her interviews, read her blog posts, analyzed her brand language, tracked the types of clients she was attracting. I saw gaps, big ones. She was all shine, no spine. Her visuals were good, but her messaging was inconsistent. Her proposals were aesthetic, but vague. Clients who needed real traction would see through it, eventually. I also started hearing rumors, quiet ones from inside the industry. She's late on deliverables. She's got great style but lacks depth. She overpromises and doesn't follow through. They weren't attacking her, not yet, but the current was shifting. That's when I made a decision. Not to strike back, not yet, but to prepare. I would build something stronger, something undeniable. But first I needed to disappear. So I unplugged, deleted socials, ghosted the industry for a few months. While she posed on rooftops and popped champagne on her stories, I was in the shadows, planning. She'd started the story. She cast herself as the rising star and me as the man who couldn't keep up. But I was about to rewrite the ending. It all came crashing down the day I saw the billboard. Not mine, hers. Right at the intersection where my old agency used to be. The same spot where I once stood watching a campaign I led light up the city. But this time, it wasn't my work. It was her face. Madison. Arms folded, confident smirk. Tagline beneath her that read, "Creative vision, unstoppable drive." It was like the universe decided to punch me in the chest just for breathing. I stood there for what felt like an hour, traffic buzzing behind me, pedestrians brushing past like I was invisible. The ache in my stomach wasn't jealousy, it was grief. Not for her success, but for the part of me that believed we were ever on the same team. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just out of her life. I'd been scrubbed from the narrative, completely. She'd taken everything I gave her, my mentorship, my strategy, even my name, and built a new story. One where I never existed. One where she was the genius all along. And the world believed it. That week, an old mutual friend sent me a podcast episode without comment. I listened to it late at night, alone in my apartment with no lights on. Madison was the guest. She spoke about starting from nothing, surviving in a male-dominated space, and breaking away from dead weight that held her back. I heard my own erasure in every sentence. I'd been replaced in her life, in the industry, in people's memories. And yet somehow, I didn't feel rage. I felt small. I stopped applying for jobs. I stopped updating my resume. I didn't even open LinkedIn anymore. Days blurred together. I barely left my apartment. The worst thing about betrayal isn't the action, it's the silence afterward. It's how the world keeps spinning like you never mattered in the first place. One night I opened an old hard drive from my agency days. Inside were folders of abandoned concepts, rejected campaigns, drafts that never made it past review. And, buried deep, I found something. An old brand architecture proposal I'd written just for fun. A theoretical project. A boutique ad firm built around rebuilding fallen brands. I remembered writing it during a late-night brainstorm, just as a mental exercise, the name of the fake firm, Revive. Something about it lit a fuse in me. Maybe I had been erased, forgotten, written out. But that didn't mean I was finished, because the only thing more dangerous than a man who's angry is a man who's patient. And I had all the time in the world. Revive started as a whisper, in my mind. A quiet rebellion. I didn't announce it to anyone. No flashy website, no launch party. Just a single encrypted Google Doc, some branding sketches, and a mission. Rebuild what's broken, starting with me. But I wasn't just out to build another ad agency. I was designing a weapon. One forged from experience, humiliation, and ruthless precision. Madison had built a house of mirrors, pretty on the surface, hollow at the core. All I had to do was wait until the cracks spread. First, I re-entered the industry, but through a back door. I reached out to burned-out freelancers, small businesses frustrated by overhyped influencers, and old clients who'd once trusted me. Not with fanfare, but with value. Quietly, I offered to help. No contracts, no names, just results. I worked under pseudonyms, ghostwriting pitch decks, redesigning brand strategies, fixing broken launches. My work started circulating in whispers. He's anonymous, but he's a genius. One day I got a message from a boutique fashion brand in LA, a brand that had just fired Madison's firm after a disastrous campaign launch. Missed deadlines. Inflated costs, no conversions. They wanted help. I delivered. They wanted vision. I gave them more than that. I gave them impact. Within 6 weeks, their engagement tripled. Sales went up 40%. And guess what happened next? Other brands started following. A whisper became a ripple. By the end of that quarter, 5 of Madison's former clients had quietly transitioned to Revive, not even knowing it was me behind the curtain. That's when I registered the company officially. LLC, trademark filings, non-compete reviews. I did everything by the book, but with one twist. I still didn't attach my real name. I used my grandfather's Daniel W. Ashford, a name with no LinkedIn, no digital trail. Just enough mystery to spark curiosity. The man in the shadows with a golden touch. Meanwhile, Madison kept growing louder. Her face was everywhere. Panels, interviews, awards. But I could see it unraveling. She started recycling the same client. Results in her portfolios. Her launch timelines got longer. Testimonials slowed. I knew what that meant. The sparkle was dimming. She was still selling the story of being unstoppable. But clients talk, especially unhappy ones. I remember sitting at a diner one afternoon when I overheard 2 junior brand managers chatting over lunch. You remember Madison Warren? Yeah, we almost hired her firm, but they said she overcharges and disappears mid-project. That's when I knew it had begun. The rot from within. But I wasn't done. The final piece of my revenge wasn't just reclaiming clients. It was redefining my presence in the industry. So I pitched something bold, a citywide branding campaign for a major tech startup that had just gone public. Their brief? Be everywhere. And that's exactly what I gave them. Billboards, subway banners, airport terminals, digital kiosks. One single brand message. Strategic, elegant, unforgettable. And at the bottom of each ad, in small white letters, Revive by Ashford. When the campaign launched, it was like lightning across the skyline. And Madison? She saw it. I know she did. Because a week later, one of her former assistants DM'd me anonymously. She screamed when she saw your name on the West Bridge. Billboard. Said it looked staged. Thought it was a prank. It wasn't. It was poetry. I never reached out to her. Never gloated. Never replied when she left a vague, bitter post about men who piggyback on women's ideas. I didn't need to. The scoreboard was public now. And she was losing ground. All I did was light the fuse. And then I watched. The fall didn't happen all at once. It came in waves, quiet, humiliating, and irreversible. The first sign was the canceled panel. Madison had been scheduled to speak at a major branding conference downtown. I knew because I'd once keynoted it myself, back when I was still wearing suits every day and giving interviews with careful optimism. She was billed as the visionary behind tomorrow's brands. But just 2 days before the event, her name vanished from the website. No explanation, no public statement, just gone. A friend still in the circuit told me quietly. They dropped her after hearing complaints from 2 ex-clients. Said she overpromised and underdelivered. They couldn't risk it. Strike 1. Strike 2 came a week later, when a well-known beauty brand publicly issued a statement on LinkedIn about ending their partnership with an external agency due to unmet expectations and unresolved delays. They didn't name her outright, but anyone who followed industry circles knew it was Madison's firm. The timing wasn't coincidental. That same week, Revive signed that brand. I wasn't the one who reached out. They came to me. The collapse gained momentum from there. Refund demands, missed deadlines, designers leaving her team. One by one, the illusions she had built started to crumble because they had no real foundation. No scaffolding of strategy or trust. Just curated aesthetics and a self-brand fed by attention. I never hacked her, never exposed her. I simply waited for her shortcuts to reveal themselves. People think revenge is about the blow, the explosive, dramatic twist that brings the villain to their knees. But in real life, it's not like that. It's slower, cleaner, more surgical. Madison began posting less frequently. The champagne photos disappeared. The motivational quotes turned bitter. Her captions went from "hustle harder" to "some people will drain your light." It was a quiet scream. Then came the headline. An industry blog, one I used to write for, years ago published a piece, "When Branding Becomes Bull: How the Aesthetic Era is Crashing." It was a takedown piece, well-researched, brutal, and clearly sourced from ex-clients and freelancers who had worked with Madison. They detailed how her agency used buzzwords to mask a lack of strategic depth, how deadlines were missed, invoices inflated, and how most of her client success stories weren't real. They were repackaged numbers from campaigns others had built. The article didn't mention her by name until the final paragraph. But the photos they used? Crystal clear. Her image, her logo, her words. It went viral in the marketing world. Quietly. Not mainstream viral, but industry viral. The kind that lives in inboxes, gets forwarded in Slack channels, whispered about over coffee. One of my old interns sent it to me with a one-line email. Guess karma knows brand strategy too. And still, I said nothing. No tweets, no smirks, no subtweets. I simply kept building. I took a walk one evening to clear my head and passed that same intersection where her billboard used to be. It had been replaced. This time it showed the new Revive campaign, minimalist, clean, and bold. A tagline at the bottom, "Built to last." She had once told me I was useless. Now my name, Ashford, was on every billboard in her city. And hers? Nowhere. That wasn't revenge, that was evolution. I never spoke to Madison again. Not after the collapse, not after the headlines, not even when mutual friends asked if I felt vindicated. What would I even say? That I won? That I got the last word? It wasn't about that anymore. The truth is, revenge stopped mattering the moment I reclaimed my identity, on my own terms. I didn't need applause. I didn't want a headline. I wanted peace. And peace, I learned, comes quietly. These days I go by David Warren again. No more aliases. No more hiding in the shadows. I still run Revive, but now with a small, loyal team. People who value depth over hype, integrity over image. And every so often, I still walk past those billboards downtown. Different campaigns now, but mine nonetheless. They remind me of the journey, of what was taken, and of what I chose to rebuild. Madison's name still comes up sometimes, usually in marketing circles as a cautionary tale. Don't get too caught in the shine, they say. Build something real. She taught me that, just not in the way she meant to. One afternoon, I found myself organizing old storage boxes in my office. At the bottom of one, I discovered a photo of us from our early days. Young, hopeful, clueless. I didn't feel bitterness, just gratitude. Because sometimes people push you off a ledge thinking they've ended you. But all they've done is taught you how to fly.